As preceptor of the Knights Panther, my word carries weight when it comes to matters of military defense and deployment. But in matters of diplomacy, my duty is to stand at the ready and follow my sworn lords into battle. In this matter, I am sworn to follow Graf Todbringer's command and ensure that his son returns safely home, and this mission is carried out well. I personally do not think it wise for the young Baron to embark on this mission. I understand his desire for glory and honour, and do agree that this mission itself, perhaps, if it's successful, could mend the rift between North and South. But the Baron's life is of great importance to the realm of Middenland. With his strong hand, his brother, the future Graf, will have much needed military support I don't believe his sister can achieve on her own. Still, it is not my duty to go against orders. I shall remain silent and do my job, defending Baron Reiner with my very life, if need be. May Ulrich watch over us all. This is Red Moon Roleplaying. The sun is beginning to set as two boats leave the great city of Altdorf and begin heading eastward along the River Reik. This is not a new journey for you three. In fact, it's exactly the same journey you made only 5 or 6 months ago now. Although it seems as if that was a different life. Back then, you were free, down and out individuals, fleeing, just trying to lay low to avoid being assassinated by a hideous cult. Now you are court physicians, commission officers, and inquisitors, and you are heading on a great expedition. The Barabel is much as you remember it. Little has changed there. Still has the same crew, although you've all noted that this time they've been joined by none other than Rena Summerfield, your old acquaintance, Kruger Hoffman. But the Carrierberg is significantly different. It is double the size of the Barabel. It is a proper imperial yacht, designed for carrying troops. It has 20 oarsmen and a crew of 20 besides that, as well as accommodating all the soldiers, the Knights Panther, the warrior priests, all their horses, all your supplies and equipment. But apparently it's been deemed useful to have the Barabel lead ahead first so that the three of you can always be a bit ahead of things, check for ambushes, and so the Carrierberg will always be about an hour or two behind you on the main waterway. It's a shame, perhaps, because it will occur to you, Heinrich Schilf, that a boat like the Carrierberg could actually go much faster than the Barabel if it needed to. But again, it has been stressed that maybe at this point of your journey you don't want to look too odd, look too as if you desperately need to be somewhere. And you have time. And so your journey has begun. But of course, just before it really began, there was a reunion. The crew of the Barabel. Joseph, once again, covered in some sort of drink spillage, but otherwise looking good, with his grey beard. Walder, grim, and yes, your friend, Rena Summerfield. It's Joseph, of course, who spoke to you all initially. Me mateys! Well, what can I say? How could I not be involved in one of the most important missions of maybe in the history of the whole Empire, eh?
Well, it's our pleasure to be with you. It's an honour to be aboard with you.
It certainly is. We're so glad to see you again.
Well, the pleasure's mine. Besides, I'm getting paid a lot of coin. A lot of coin. My goodness, be enough to last us all for a year or two, won't it? Grim just nods. Walder seems a little standoffish. She keeps giving you a bit of an eye. Once again, you never know what it is you've done to annoy her, Heinrich, but you've done it again. Rena, on the other hand, is all smiles, giving you a bit of a wink. Yeah, well, again, good to see you all, and maybe some of that money can flow down now that you're a big Mr. Important man, Kruger.
Well, I'd certainly like to make it possible, yeah. share the wealth, whatever it is that we have. And not that we have all that much.
You'd better. I don't know how you did it, but someone might have to remind those people up in Midland that you're actually a no-good, down, dirty thief.
I have tried to hide that as best as I can.
At this, Joseph comes over and speaks a little quieter, mainly in your direction, Siegfrieda. And also, lass, I'm happy for you, but what on earth are you thinking? This game you're playing, it's dangerous. You do know that, don't you?
Oh, believe me, I am aware of it every single day.
I mean, did you have to pick that name?
It was a vacant name and a vacant title.
Aye, lass, but because there's an awful lot of baggage with it. I just hope you're all right is all. Again, don't worry, we know how to keep a secret. We're not, but, you know.
It is better this than I conjured a name out of thin air. At least there is a way of, in theory, verifying this identity, even though there is some negativity that surrounds it.
Just be careful, lass. I'm sure you live in the high life, but nobles is nobles. It's dangerous people.
Well, your advice is duly taken.
He nods. Walder gives you a bit of a look, Heinrich. So, enjoying that fancy hat and fancy rosette?
Well, as much as one can.
Do any of us need to worry that you're going to suddenly set us on fire during the night?
Certainly not. We spent enough time together. I'm sure if you had secrets, I would either be willing to overlook them in the name of our long history, or I would have found them by now.
She gives you a bit of a scoff. Well, that's good to know. I just hope that when push comes to shove, she says, looking back at the boat behind you, full of priests, I hope you'll remember where your roots are. I don't know why you had to go down this route. What happened to just being a good person?
Well, being a good person is not mutually exclusive with the life I've chosen. But, I mean, you've been there for the things that put me on this new course.
Aye. And I'm trying to forget them, and do what I can to just help out on the boat. Whatever. I'm glad you're okay at least. We are getting paid a lot for this, so that's something.
We each have our own paths, and we will serve in our own ways. But if I can help make sure that what happened to my family doesn't happen to anyone else's, then, well, I owe it to them to do it.
A bit of a shrug and a nod. Grim looks over and simply says, Lay off him. Boy's found a path. Ain't you, boy?
Well, some days it feels like it found me, but yes.
Stick to it. Always. Aye.
And what of you? Have the rivers been kind to you in the time since we've been parted?
Grim shrugs, and Walder just remarks, Not so much. Trade's not very good at the moment. Food shortages and money shortages happening absolutely everywhere. We were in trouble until we got this very nice Imperial Commission, isn't that right, Captain? Oh, aye, but, we're not just doing it for the money. No. I mean, the heroes of Middenheim, how could we not be involved? But the money does help.
Well, then I'm glad your service to the Empire can come with other benefits.
Rena gives you a bit of a nudge, Kruger. Besides, it'd be useful to take some money back to old Wickendorf. Not having a great time there. Granted, whatever Siegfrieda pulled has helped a little. This is village elder really pissed off this Grand Duke fella. But, well, then he did give us lots of taxes, so there's that.
Yes, I'm certain there will be a lot of rebuilding that needs to be done, and, well, a lot of work to adapt to this new situation. But I'm happy to hear that it's at least not as bad as it was.
No. Beastmen have been raiding a couple of times, mainly the trade route, the old road. They are starting to build one of those new watchtower thingies. That was kind of... She then looks to you, Siegfrieda. That was kind of the deal my sister had to make to pay off some of the owed tax. All your ancestral home is now Imperial. They're building a tower on it. He's had sold the land, so to speak.
Oh, I see.
But unfortunately, those convoys have come under attack a few times. But, well, beastmen are everywhere these days, aren't they?
I mean, sadly so. Tragically so. But, and I say this with not a little resignation, As much as I feel for these people, it is not that we can be everywhere, arranging resolution to every single injustice. We helped people to the degree that we could, and from there it is up to them to lift themselves the rest of the way. Trail off a little there.
Well, again, I know my sister isn't always the most appreciative, as you remember, but she is appreciative, and you have our thanks. We're surviving. Again, don't know how you pulled it off. Really don't know how you pulled anything off, actually. This whole thing you're up to. Wow, I wish we'd thought of that, Kruger.
It is a pretty epic con, I must say. I'm impressed as well.
People always used to say it was difficult.
I mean, Siegfrieda's really good.
And with that, the crew of the Barabel lets you be as you get accustomed to once again travelling down the River Reik. In some ways, the journey is very similar. There are no obstacles, no enemies as you travel along the river. Perhaps that's because you're a convoy of two quite large boats, and one of them very large, meaning that your average raider or brigand doesn't want to risk trying to assault such a expedition. However, Heinrich, it's also not the same. There's less boats, far less than when you came this way before. You do, of course, stop off at some towns and villages to eat and drink, stop for the night. Most are normal, but a lot of them are shut. One village is abandoned. On the roads, you see more road warden patrols passing by. At one point, you see a whole regiment of Imperial soldiers marching off somewhere. And another day, you see a whole bunch of peasants leading sheep and children, and then just walking along, heading from somewhere, carrying bags on their backs. It's not quite the same this time, Heinrich.
I have changed. The Empire has changed. But all this change, all this unease, it's all the more reason to see this mission through.
Very true, Heinrich. You know river life. This isn't how it's supposed to be. Things are happening. And this is just the Reichland. You're still in the Reichland. You begin wondering what it might be like in other parts of the Empire where the wars are actually all happening, apparently.
Oh, I hesitate to imagine. But it is true in politics as it is with chaos. The rot starts at the top. And no amount of work border to border or village to village is going to matter if we can't ensure that the Empire is strong at its head.
This is true. And so, a week and a half passes. Eventually, you once again pass by Kemperbad, and once again head south. Briefly, you reach that crossing. You know that down one route lies Wittgendorf. And once Castle Wittgenstein, although apparently now that will just be a small tower. You remember those towers? Part of some imperial project to make watchtowers. It seems that's continuing. But this time, no. You head the other way. You're going to keep going, all the way down to the city of Nuln. This all takes about 2 weeks. A week and a half to get to that point, and then another 3 or 4 days to get all the way down to Nuln. There are some opportunities here, if you wish to take them. You have a large group of individuals. Some of them you know better than others. The Altdorf delegation tend to keep to themselves, but when it comes to their sermons and their prayers, they welcome any who wish to pray to Sigmar. Baron Reiner and his bodyguard are reasonably amicable people. There is this young priest. None of you really were introduced to her. She just seems to be here. Barely looks over the age of 21, and yet apparently was quite useful to the cult of Shalia. They say she has the miracle of healing, which is quite a rare miracle even in Shalians. You also have your physicians, who you're having to get used to, Siegfrieda. You have the boat crew, and of course the rambling Professor Quintus Fassbinder, who is an encyclopedia, which you eventually realize if you do really try and keep him specific, he does actually eventually teach you some interesting things if you wish. It just takes an awfully long time. But then again, on the boat, you have an awful long time. Not to mention, you have a lovely lovely new 50 or 60 books, all packed up in a rather cramped quarters. But with that and the little lab equipment, Siegfrieda, you have some interesting things you can get up to. Would any of you like to do something with your downtime?
Well, my hope is to learn a little more about the infection spread by chaos and corruption. Our encounter with the Emperor's illness has given me some invigoration in this regard. Obviously, my preferred way of treating most things is with the knife, but I know some infections do fester a little deeper than a blade can reach. My intention is primarily to study the books, but then to ask any of the many, many experts that are travelling with us. What I'm looking for is to expand my knowledge of medicine to account for the more supernatural, otherworldly, let's just call it what it is, chaotic blights, mutations, and the like that exist in our world, and ways to treat them. I mean, even if they're not necessarily codified and catalogued, people will have heard of miracles and instances where there have been recoveries. There's often a kernel of truth in those kinds of things, so I'd wish to find the commonalities and determine decent courses of treatment, given that we're about to enter the belly of the beast.
Certainly. And unfortunately, the answer is perhaps not one that makes you happy. First of all, there is nothing in the books you don't already know. Yes, they're new books, but when it comes to this specific field, there's nothing. Medicine is medicine. People have theories on how to treat certain illnesses, but that always reaches a certain point where something just can't be treated, according to the books. You realize you're going to have to ask some people who maybe you don't see eye to eye to. After all, you have a whole bunch of warrior priests of the Order of the Silver Hammer. Is it their whole thing, fighting chaos? Do they have a secret method of not becoming so corrupt? The answer is simple. Faith. Faith in Sigmar. True faith, not lip service, not going to the temple every couple of days. It is blind, pure obedience in the ideals every single day. That is the only way to even remotely combat the nightmare of chaos. Now, of course, mayhaps being an educated woman, you seek then the other point of view. What of the Ulricans? They aren't quite as zealot about it, but even Baron Reiner and the Preceptor agree that faith is important. For them it's the faith in Ulrich, the faith in their weapons, the faith in battle. Quintus Fassbinder perhaps presents the more nuanced approach. He is a Sigmarite, and he does still echo what the priests say. But he does acknowledge that perhaps the faith does not always need to be directed at one god. Perhaps it is the faith in yourself, the faith in the gods that is itself all you need. But again, even he stresses to you several times how important it is in your studies to respect and admire the ways of Sigmar.
I would like to sit down with one of these silver hammers, if I may.
You may.
Please, pardon me for a moment of your time. What is your name?
You are seated across from a man, maybe one of the younger priests. He is bold, as they all are. Bold, scarred, wearing the yellow detailed black robes, the symbols of the Order of the Silver Hammer. Of course, my lady, I am happy to instruct you in the ways of Sigmar, although I confess the captain would be better suited. I'm still just, well, not a novice, but merely a standard warrior priest myself.
Oh, I'm merely looking for... I'm not looking for expertise, good sir. I am looking for anecdotal evidence. And as I say, what is your name?
Brother Ludwig.
Brother Ludwig. My name is Lady Wittgenstein. It is my honour to be sat in your audience, but I simply have a question for you. Your faith, which provides you with such resistance against the malignancy of corruption, and has been attested to do the same for others of your kind, does that faith restrict you from any actions? Are you permitted, for example, to take a wife, to to parent a child? Are you allowed to express yourself as you wish?
That would depend on the order. Some have a different doctrine. There is nothing in the Testament of Sigmar that forbids matrimony, of course. But in the Order of the Silver Hammer, no, we do not take to any family. Our lives are for Sigmar.
So, if I may ask, is that something that is chosen, or is it an inability? I do not mean to pry in any way, as in to besmirch any part of you. Believe me, I give a smile and lean forward as if I'm about to sort of pat him on the knee reassuringly, but I withhold from that. This person, young as he may be, could demolish my head in one fell blow. I'm sure he wouldn't, but he could. My questioning is this. My reasoning is thus. I have witnessed the strains of corruption that can lace themselves beneath the flesh and into the minds of their victims. And what they do is cause mutations, as I'm sure you're aware and have probably witnessed yourself.
Yes, the mark of the heretic, yes.
Quite. That succumbing to chaos changes a person. My question to you is, does your adherence change you?
It is a hard question to answer, my lady. Spiritually, we would say yes. It improves us, makes us better, able to withstand temptation, able to withstand the vile corruptions of chaos, and better serve the Emperor. If you are asking when one receives the blessings of Sigmar, that is up to Sigmar. Perhaps us warrior priests are not as learned in some of the miracles as the more, let us say, scholarly clerics. But if we are chosen, we do receive the gifts. And if you're wondering, in your question, he leans forward, if a brother or sister does indeed break the bonds of our oath, if we do commit the sins that anger Sigmar, then yes, Sigmar will take those powers away.
Well, that is enlightening, but if you may permit me one last question. Is the faith that you have and the prohibition that exists, let's say, between you committing an act that Sigmar would disapprove of and not, is that like a present feeling, almost like a weight in your mind that if you were about to do something that would break your vows, there would almost be a pressure within yourself to stop? Or is it something willingly adopted and removed, like you would, I guess, don and remove your cloak at the end, and beginning and the end of the day?
He gives you a very serious look as he says, I would know. Sigmar is always watching. Yes, I would feel a break in my very soul, my very being.
Well, I put it to you that, and I mean no offence by this, although I can tell there's one coming, that a chaotic corruption really is not so different. I don't mean the effect. Clearly it is better for everyone in our world that Sigmar smiles and his warriors are anointed and so forth. But the idea that a person can become corrupted and their actions influenced thus, and that it will affect their body and their mind, but they may be able to fight against it. That having faith and having the blessings of that faith actually affect your body and mind and actions is like a mirror image to being corrupted. That, again, if you were so inclined, you could resist the inclination to serve your god and therefore break free from its, and I say this word purely illustratively, you understand, you could break free from its corruption.
At that, this individual falls silent and looks at you with concern, and then looks directly behind you. And then you feel a presence just behind you, and a woman's voice sternly says, "And I would think, my lady, to ask such questions would be ill-advised. I would worry about the person's soul asking such questions, and caution them against investigating such heresies any further."
Well, I am no inquisitor.
And you turn to see the stern-eyed face of the one who is the priest captain, Jocelyn Sparheim, grim, haggard, looking at you through one of her eyes again. She has an awful, awful burn mark, but her eyes are still quite sharp. "You are no inquisitor, my lady, and as for respect for your rank, I would advise you to commit to prayer and ask Sigmar to guide you through these troubled times and the clearly troubled thoughts you seem to have in your mind."
Oh, no, you mistake me, lady. Please, forgive my questioning as an expert's curiosity. I am not intending on testing your warrior priest here, and no more than I am testing my own capacity to withstand corruption. I am making I suppose you might call it thesis on the nature of faith and corruption, and how it may protect us from some of the obstacles we face ahead of us. So please excuse my leave. I will leave you be, both of you, and thank you for your time.
Brother Ludwig stands up and gives you an honourable bow. Priest Captain Jocelyn glares at you and doesn't do anything else, just glares. Later on, when you bring up such thoughts with Quintus Fassbinder, he will actually caution you as well, but with a little bit of rambling, admit that the very words you've just said are not totally original, that actually some heresies have suggested the very thing you've just said.
Well, the fact that it's described as a heresy that's to ask what I just said doesn't fill me with a great deal of warmth, but it does make me feel like I may be on the right path.
Indeed. For now, though, let us say that you've learned an awful lot about religion that maybe you didn't know before, and in talking with the Oricans and Sigmarites, maybe you've always discarded it. You haven't even really learnt that much about your own patron, Cleo, one of the faces of Arena. But after all this, and some of those new books you have that do actually have some basic theology, why don't you give yourself law religion? You now have a little more understanding of faith and religion than you did before. Maybe it'll be useful. What of you, Kruger? Is there anything you'd like to learn?
There is indeed. Given that we have this immense font of knowledge that is Quintus Fassbinder with us, I would love to learn more about the night goblins. The ones that we are, well, quite likely to meet during our journeys. I've heard all kinds of, horrid things about them, really. But there's bound to be many of them. We need to know how to avoid them, and if we can't avoid them, how we can perhaps avoid having to fight them to the death. Because that could end very badly, not just for them, but also for us. So yes, I wanted to try to tap his vast knowledge of the night goblins.
Certainly. It takes an awfully long time. He really does know an awful lot about greenskins, orcs, goblins, hobgoblins, snotlings, squigs, trolls, ogres, giants, which apparently some people consider part of the family. You are then reminded, no, not ogres, no, he apologizes. No, that's a completely different subspecies, my apologies. Oh my goodness, I'm tired. But eventually you do manage to focus him. You see, night goblins are considered, well, two things. First of all, they enjoy subterranean climates. Doesn't mean they can't come out into the sun by any means, but they're not fond of it, hence their famous hoods. They wear big black hoods or red hoods, or they do actually have different colours. They're not always literally dressed in black. They love the moon, symbology of the moon, very important. Not necessarily, though, the moons that we have. Sometimes the crooked moon is a symbol, I think, of their gods. Yes, They have gods! And no, despite all research, they are not chaos gods. But they are not our gods, no. Gork and Mork. The reality of what those beings are is unknown, but they could be some sort of powerful spirit. Again, there are different gods in our world. You are aware of that, of course. The elves have gods, the dwarves have, well, their ancestors' spirits, which is slightly different, but they see it as the same thing. Even the halflings have gods, did you know?
Well, it makes a lot of sense, and I think having that level of understanding of, well, the other types of creatures that live in this world, it helps give a certain kind of respect for them.
Certainly!
There's so many people that look down on greenskins and think of them as some form of lower being, but if they too have gods, if they have culture, I mean, are they truly so different from us?
Well, very. Remember, they are the enemy of mankind. Sigmar has proclaimed this. Don't forget that, my boy. Yes, perhaps they can be...
Oh, of course, yes. Sigmar has...
Yes, perhaps they can be temporarily negotiated with and studied. It's true, but we must always be careful. At the end of the day, we need to be wary of them. They are not our friends.
That is true. I'm just hoping that maybe they don't have to be our enemies. But let's see. But it's very good to know these things, and your knowledge is incredibly valuable to me.
And so he goes on, and yes, night goblins, subterranean, vicious, deeply cunning, despite their short stature being actually quite agile and quite capable of killing a well-armoured opponent if they have the advantage. They are not, perhaps, quite like the Skaven. Yes, they rely on numbers, but they are more into stealth and ambushes, and less about overrunning with numerical superiority. They often don't need to. They live in the mountains, after all. Still, they can be dangerous. They can amass one of the greatest warlords. Warlord Snarsnik is known to have conquered the peak, Karak 8 Peaks, from the dwarves, and got himself a very big grudge, as that was a very, very important dwarven hold that this goblin warlord held for quite a long time. They have an affinity for fungal enjoyment. They apparently are skilled herbalists and can take on substances that would kill a human. They're also, some would say, very chaotic. And they have a proclivity for treachery. Although apparently, according to Quintus Fassbinder, they are not the most treacherous greenskin. That is the hobgoblin. So treacherous that every single greenskin in existence hates hobgoblins.
That is fascinating. And knowing, of course, that they prefer to ambush and to essentially lay traps, that is something that worries me a great deal, because we are going to be on their home turf, presumably, which will give them ample opportunity to ambush our heavily armored Knights Panther. They're very powerful, I'm sure, in the open field, but in cramped subterranean environments against people, creatures who know those areas, who call those areas their homes, we might be at a disadvantage, in spite of the overwhelming force that we should be able to put to bear.
You will be. But perhaps now you'll at least have a small bit of foreknowledge. At least maybe now you'll be suspecting it. Maybe you can counter it. You could counter it if you have time, but it won't be easy. And again, they have strange gods. Apparently they even have magic. And it is a magic that no one truly understands. The wizards don't understand it, and it's not chaos magic. It's something else. Highly unexplainable. But even then, Quintus stops himself, being eyed by inquisitors and priests nearby.
Yes, of course, that is fully understandable. This is very much bordering on the heretical, and I understand that the line I am expected to take is, of course, to kill them all as soon as we meet with them, because they are some form of lower being that doesn't deserve to be close to us, fine humans. But, I just worry, that's all. I just worry about where we're headed, and hopefully, as you say, with this knowledge, I might be able to help us get out of a tight spot, maybe avoid an ambush.
Indeed. And so you can have for yourself law night goblins, and you can also start at your initial intelligence value. What of you, Heinrich Schilf? Seems your friends are making good use of their time. You observe Kruger chatting a lot with this scholar. You observe Siegfrieda hanging around with the priests. Fascinating, but what about you?
Well, not to make you continually revisit the well of lore, I also have questions about the nature of our universe. Not heretical, as in Siegfrieda, or tantamount to treason, like Kruger. No, these are more at the core of what it means to be an imperial citizen. Unfortunately, it appears that Quintus is busy, font of knowledge that he is, and I don't imagine any conversation with Jocelyn Sparheim will lead in the academic direction. That does not seem where her skill set lies. So I'd like to find Bertha, because I have some questions about the deeper mysteries of Sigmar, the very kinds of legends that are leading us into the past. Perhaps the segments that I skipped a bit through in Inquisitor training, or the ones I wasn't paying super great attention to.
You will find Bertha, who is spending most of her time with Emmeline, although you have noticed that both of them do seem to, at some of the meals, appreciate the company of the priests. They don't go anywhere near the Ulricans. And while initially she is very dour, again, Bertha has been changed by her experiences. She does start to lighten up a little like her old self used to when you start really questioning her about Sigmar. Yes, there were quite a few things you missed, Inquisitor, but that's all right. I already had quite a few years as a normal priest before I decided to take this route. So perhaps I had more time than you.
Well, I would be deeply grateful if you could share for me the kinds of things I've yet to experience or learn.
Emmeline leans in and says, well, one thing Bertha is knowledgeable, and she knows. And the more you know, Inquisitor, the more you can watch out for those lot over there, she says, glowering at the Ulricans.
Indeed, all the better to be prepared. This legend, now I don't mean to brush into the realm of disbelief, but stories tend to grow over time. What is true about the expedition that we are following?
You, over the next few days, learn quite a few things, specifically relating to the legends of Sigmar and the history of Blackfire Pass. There is quite a lot. Suffice to say, there is a lot of proof, at least according to the Sigmarites, that Sigmar did go there. After all, Sigmar was once a man. A very important man. The unifier of the First Empire, the one who united the tribes against the Greenskins and Beastmen and brought humanity out from its supposed barbaric roots, at least according to the history of the Empire. He did indeed travel that way. He did indeed make his way there one last time. There are several shrines and holy spots on that route that are known to pilgrims. It is only when he gets to the very end that the doctrine becomes murky. Did he just vanish into thin air? Was he actually heading back to the dwarves to thank them for the gift of the great Warhammer? Did he actually succeed in doing this? Again, the dwarven scholars are very vague about it. But he did go that way and bless several spots. And of course, he is Sigmar, and he is a god, so that does mean they're important, right? Bertha is a little conflicted about the idea that you're going to actually find the Warhammer. On one hand, it would be a tremendous, tremendous honour and a true sign of hope in these dark times. But on the other hand, the idea that it was never the hammer in the first place, but the idea that Sigmar did not leave the hammer with the Emperors, but took it with him or just left it, she's conflicted about that, and there is nothing in the actual scripture that explains why that would be. You know that the Grand Theogenist said that some scholars aren't surprised by this, but it seems that someone like Bertha, whose roots are more mundane, is quite surprised. You wonder how many Sigmarites would be a little conflicted at the idea that the great Warhammer was just left lying around? Why? Why?
Oh, mysteries that I hope we can answer by the end of this journey.
Yes, I hope so. Again, I was conflicted, Inquisitor, but I have seen signs of late. I have dreamt. I have seen us going to a place of darkness and then finding great light, and I'm sure that's a positive omen, I think.
Well, let us hope so. You haven't led me wrong on these matters before. If you believe it to be the case, then so shall I.
Bertha gives you a smile, and Emmeline gives you a firm pat on the shoulder, and afterwards privately says, "Good one, Inquisitor. She likes going on about that sort of thing. I know I should pay more attention myself. I know. I just... it all goes over my head. I'd rather just know, there's the bad one. Sigmar's with me. Punch him in the face, you know?"
Oh, believe me, I understand. Let's not forget how I arrived in this position. But even as our martial prowess steels us against that which we see, for others it's faith. And, looking around, the Empire could use a bit more faith, right?
That it could. And while Bertha's not been herself, I think this mission's given us some hope. I believe her. I believe it. It's a bit weird, but I think we really have been chosen by Sigmar, and we're going to save the Empire. That's what I believe.
Well, I'm not one to indulge entirely in that kind of zealous thinking, but it would be, suffice it to say, not the best mood to demoralize my compatriots this early in the adventure. So, despite my reservations, I will nod and give Emmeline a hearty slap on their shoulder. My belief is what will carry us through this day.
Emmeline smiles. You think they appreciate it. And you can have Lore Sigmar. You are now very knowledgeable about Sigmar himself. We will also, for the sake of flavour, say that includes the history of Blackfire Pass. And so time passes, and your two boats make their way down, getting closer to the great city of Null, getting closer to home, Kruger. It has been a while for you. And that is when you see a slight obstacle before you. 10 or 20 very small fishing boats, all heading in your direction, filled with baggage and people. Something, it seems, is occurring.
You have listened to an episode of Red Moon Roleplaying, where we play the legendary campaign The Enemy Within for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th Edition, published by Cubicle 7. In this final part of the series, we are tackling Empire in Ruins. Joining us as players in this series are none other than Aaron Hammonds from Queen's Court Games and our dear friend Matthew Dawkins. The music was made by Flowers for Body Snatchers, Wordclock, Metatron Omega, Ager Sonus, Apocryphus, Halgrath, and Northumbria, featuring a number of collaborations with other artists, and was used with permission from their label Cryochamber. Check out their website at cryochamber.bandcamp.com or their YouTube channel for some moody dark ambient. We would like to give massive thanks to our champions of the Red Moon, Martin Heuschober, Simon Cooper, David, Julia, Camilla, Bob Lange, Cameron, Graham Barey, Doug Thomson, Lily, Mike Parker, Maciej, and Black Templar for their generous support. And we would of course also like to thank all of our other patrons. Without your support, the show would not be possible. If you want to support our work, please check us out on Patreon. You can get access to our Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay bonus campaign, Rough Nights and Hard Days, as well as bonus campaigns for Cult of Divinity Lost and Call of Cthulhu there. On top of that, we also offer early and raw access to all of our recordings. You can also hear your name read on the show as a champion of the Red Moon, as well as play Cult with us. Most importantly, that support is what keeps the show going, so do check us out there. Thank you again for listening, and remember that Skaven are definitely not real, and even if they were, the Emperor has already dealt with that particular problem.